The convent bells tolled their final lament, high in the windswept hills of Thessaly, where olive groves trembled under the autumn gale, a cluster of nuns huddled in their crumbling chapel. They knelt beneath fractured frescoes, saints' faces worn smooth by centuries of grief and time. On the distant ridge, flames danced like omens. Ottoman banners unfurled crimson silk rippling like blood across the peaks. The women knew the truth in their bones. No couriers arrived from the villages below. No defenders stood between them and the storm. Their abbess, Sister Eleni of Lissa, gripped a weathered silver crucifix that had weathered 100 tempests. She murmured, "If they breach these walls, guard your vows in the depths of your souls. They cannot steal what lives within." But she was mistaken. When the conqueror's horde stormed the gates, vows, prayers, and piety crumbled like dust before the tide of history's unyielding march. If tales from the Ottoman-Byzantine frontiers stir your soul letters from missionaries, dusty Vatican dispatches hit subscribe. It fuels our dive into the archives, unearthing voices long silenced. Now, to the heart of it. The convent's first stones shattered before the sun dipped low, hymns swallowed by the roar of cannon, and cries that pierced the evening sky. The Ottomans spared no shafts for holy sites. They blasted the portals with thunderous iron, a thunderclap of warning and dominion. To them, a convent was no sanctuary. It was a thorn of rebellion, a cross daring to pierce the soil of subjugation. Within, the sisters buried their treasures, silver chalices etched with forgotten prayers, icons stitched in threads of gold, shards of saints' bones tucked beneath the chapel's cold flagstones. They clung to the hope that if their flesh failed, their spirit might linger. Yet the invaders sought no gold or relic. They craved testimony, a testament that they had not merely toppled armies, but toppled gods themselves. By twilight, the survivors were herded into the courtyard, torch flames casting their white habits in flickering gold and black. They were promised an audience with the Pasha, a vow as hollow as the wind. What unfolded etched itself into legend, so harrowing that even ecclesiastical scribes averted their quills from the raw truth. Come dawn, the convent lay in cinders. Smoke curled from the refectory where bread and quiet contemplation once reigned. Ottoman standards snapped from the bell tower, a signal to distant legions that defiance had bowed. Yet in that bloodied yard, amid the hush before the blade, an unforeseen miracle stirred. The soldiers braced for wails, but heard song a chorus not of surrender but of steel-willed resolve. Bound in coarse ropes, the remaining sisters lifted their voices in the Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world. Their tones quavered yet held firm, a thread of light in the encroaching night. The Ottoman captain, torn between scorn and unease, hauled the abbess forward. Eleni still clasped the salvaged silver cross, her knuckles white as bone. He offered clemency. Renounce your deity, embrace the victor's creed, and your flock shall breathe free. Her retort sealed the shadows upon her. I surrendered my life long ago. What more can you claim? The captain paused, a flicker of something human crossing his face, then averted his gaze, consigning her to his underlings. What transpired next eluded full chronicle, even Ottoman annals. Drunk on triumph, cloaked it as discipline for the unreasonable. Yet in later missives from Europe, her name resurfaced like a ghost. Eleni of Lissa, the abbess who would not yield. By midday, the bells were forged into currency, the rooftop cross carted eastward as spoils. But whispers slithered through the valleys. When gales howled through the wreckage under moonless skies, one could still hear women's voices not lamenting, but invoking the divine. The exodus commenced at once. The remnants of the order, 22 souls in ragged veils, were prodded southward to the sea, ankles lashed, shadowed by mounted Ottomans like hawks over prey. They were no mere war prizes, but emblems of subjugation, living icons that even hallowed stones could shatter. The trek was a gauntlet of cruelty. The sun flayed the path. These cloistered women, who had known only the convent's gentle rhythms, staggered from parching thirst and bone-deep fatigue. When one faltered, another draped her veil over the fallen form, shielding it from the hooves of indifference, a last bastion of grace in a realm stripped bare. Eleni's parting edict echoed in their ears. If the cross slips from your grasp, clasp one another. 7 days of torment brought them to Volos harbour. There waited the galleys, hulks of timber and tar, built for dominion, not solace. They were crammed onto benches scarred by the weight of felons and thralls, wrists manacled to the wood. As canvas bellied with breeze, Greece's shores dissolved into mist, carrying away all they had cherished. The vessel's overseer, Yusuf Aga, logged them with cold precision, cargo of spices, coin, cloth, and sacred prisoners. This very manifest, unearthed eons later in Istanbul's vaults, validated a saga once branded fable. The Odyssey to Constantinople spanned 12 days of unrelenting fury. Gales clawed the decks, salt seared their gashes, famine gnawed at their frames. But the true fracture was isolation, no voice save barked edicts. They drifted like spectres between firmament and foam. By night, the youngest, Sister Magdalena, breathed psalms under her breath, her timbre a fragile thread amid the tempest's howl. Even the fettered wretches around Greeks, Serbs, Italians tilted their heads to catch the melody. For an instant, the ocean hushed. When the prow cleaved the Bosphorus, Constantinople's silhouette ascended, domes and spires glinting like daggers in the aurora. Across the strait, the metropolis pulsed with might, the city of the world's desire, now their iron yoke. From the quays, they were marched through labyrinthine lanes thronged with traders, warriors, and bondsmen. Onlookers halted, eyes widening at the anomaly, Christian nuns amid the throng of the subdued. Even in an empire forged in conquest, such rarities commanded gaze. They were ushered past Blakeney's ancient ramparts to the imperial quarter, where destinies were forged. In Hagia Sophia's umbra, the former basilica of Christendom, they were compelled to genuflect. As the muezzin's wail spiraled from the minarets, one sister breathed, "We have returned home, yet it is ours no more." Before first light, they were herded into a vast marble quadrangle ringed by colossal pillars. This was no pit of despair, it was the Divan-i Humayun, the imperial divan, where the Sultan's edict reigned supreme. Here, the vanquished were not weighed by monarchs or clerics, but by conquest's unyielding code. For the Thessalian sisters, their creed would be assayed against the scales of empire. At the chamber's heart sat the Grand Vizier, his visage an enigma of stone. To his flank, scribes poised with quill and vellum, primed to inscribe every facet, names, years, designated roles. Every utterance would etch into ledgers that persist to this day, marred by wax and the patina of ages. The sisters stood in shredded habits, gazes cast low. Via interpreters, they learned the Sultan's grace hinged on a solitary clause: embrace conversion and new identities, sustenance and existence within the palace awaited. Reject and face the discipline of belief, a euphemism veiling incarceration or oblivion. Silence reigned. Sister Magdalena quivered. She had witnessed other supplicants' fates before the vizier: Greeks, Armenians, Slavs, devoured by the realm's hush. As guards lunged to seize her, the eldest, Sister Daria, broke ranks. She confronted the vizier not as thrall, but as one who had beheld empires bloom and wither. "My lord," she intoned, "you may rebrand us, but the prayers we harbour cannot be redacted." The translator faltered, pondering if such audacity merited voicing. When he did, the vizier's mask held firm. Then came the chill riposte. Prayers wither when the tongue forfeits its craft. With a flick of his wrist, the sisters were remanded not to the scaffold, but to Topkapi's nether vaults, where unyielding captives languished. Some dubbed it leniency, others, in time, branded it a torment profound. Certain souls received a subtler cage, veiled as duty. Beneath the palace's verdant grove sprawled a maze of vaulted corridors, walled from the sun's caress. Each cell boasted a meagre slot for luminescence, scant to distinguish dusk from dawn. The nuns were divested of their veils, clad in coarse shifts, and decreed to toil, scrubbing tiles, mending linens, stoking hearths that warmed the lofty halls but chilled their own. It was crafted to pulverize them, transmuting sanctity into drudgery. Yet the Ottomans misjudged. These were souls schooled in renunciation, silence, want, seclusion, were old companions. For them, affliction was not scourge, it was belief incarnate. In this netherworld, their rigour forged a shield. By nightfall they communed in secrecy. One incised a cross into the mortar with her nail, another inscribed verses in the grit under her pallet. They tallied days by the muezzin's cadence, not yielding to it, but wielding it as a rebel chronometer for a creed that scorned oblivion. Whispers rippled among the underlings, the voiceless sisters, alien women entombed below who neither uttered nor implored. Some deemed them accursed, others hallowed. Their muteness reverberated through the passages, louder than litanies. Days melted into moons, blisters scarred their palms from scouring, mending, kindling flames that comforted others but starved them. Names were proscribed, each bore a numeral, a brand of possession. The empire wagered that duration and deprivation would warp even the sturdiest devotion. Then dawned the subsequent trial, benevolence masquerading as compassion. Provisions, unguents, silks arrived in their lairs. Erudite palace scholars arrived with velvet tones, proffering respite, serenity, minor liberties. Your deity and ours are not foes, soothed one imam. Adopt our idiom, and liberty shall be yours. But they grasped the bargain's price, effacing the essence of self. To obliterate was the sole transgression they could not abide. Sister Magdalena, once fragile and faltering, ascended as their pillar. She breathed scriptural shards recalled from the cloister, half-lost verses reforged into sustaining invocations. Though fractured, the sacred word persisted. When suasion faltered, the veils dropped. Torches extinguished, rations halved. No more gentle summons, only void and gloom. One by one, they were summoned to a constricted chamber where clerks lurked. Each was bidden to echo, alone a vowel of yielding. Compliance granted palace domicile. Defiance ushered into the ether. It was no cataclysm of savagery, but a deliberate erosion of the spirit. Belief was not wrenched by violence. It was eroded by famine, anticipation, and the soft query, why endure for a deity who remains mute? A handful capitulated. 2 Corfio twins at last breathed the incantation. They were robed in satin and led away. Shadows no more. For the steadfast, each vanishing fortified their mettle. Sister Daria, once bold before the Grand Vizier, withered to pallor and frailty. When wardens demanded her title, she offered a spectral smile. "Name me Silence," she replied. Her audacity infected like a fever. From that juncture, none addressed their jailers. Queried, they countered with hush. And in that hush, they seized what the realm deemed confiscated: agency. Bureaucratic tomes noted them cursorily: alien detainees, uncooperative, unproductive. To the Ottomans, botched assimilations. To posterity, harbingers of unyielding creed. By the time vernal blooms graced the palace groves overhead, merely 11 of the 22 endured, gaunt, hoary, nigh effaced. Yet below, their clandestine oratory abided. Mute, concealed, timeless. Eons on, as excavators probed Constantinople's bowels, none anticipated that amid strata of marble and dominion, these women's imprints would linger. Women who invoked in obscurity, bequeathing the sole bounty the victors could not plunder. Their creed incised in rock, crosses gouged into basalt. A Latin fragment, half obliterated by epochs. In tenebris lucet light gleams in the gloom. That modest revelation reshaped all. It affirmed these women had not evaporated. They had imprinted, a tacit uprising graven in masonry. Over time, sagas of the spectral sisters burgeoned into murmurs among thralls and attendants. On select full-moon vigils, the nether halls chilled, the ether tinged with phantom incense, though no blaze kindled. Recollection, folklore, or fusion spurned extinction. Ages hence, European sojourners lured to the Ottoman court's enigmas gleaned shards of the identical lore. A Gallic envoy in 1712 jotted that among veteran palace aides lingered a taboo narrative of Christian women who hymned themselves heavenward. He scorned it as fable, yet the masonry had long proclaimed verity. The oratory crumbles now, yet the incisions persist, faded supplications gouged into the stone, a murmur of women who spurn oblivion. In their muteness, they yet proclaim. And if this chronicle lingers with you this eve, let it abide. Drop a remark below, what stirred in you beholding their trial. And should you crave more obscured chronicles lurking in history's gloam, subscribe and venture further into the veil. For certain verities merit recall, however fiercely they resist the grave.